Why would anyone choose to live here, on islands surrounded by one of the roughest oceans on Earth? On cliffs that rise hundreds of meters above the sea, in villages hidden beneath mountains and clouds. At first glance, the Faroe Islands seem like a place people would leave, not a place where they would stay. Yet more than 50,000 people call these islands home. This is the Faroe Islands. A remote archipelago lost in the North Atlantic between Iceland, Norway, and Scotland. A land of towering cliffs, violent storms, and breathtaking beauty. But behind the dramatic landscapes lies a question that has shaped life here for centuries. Why do people continue to live on these isolated cliffs? Today, we travel deep into the North Atlantic to find the answer. From the highest sea cliffs in Europe to villages connected by tunnels beneath the ocean, to a way of life unlike anywhere else on Earth. This is the story of the Faroe Islands, and the people who call these cliffs home. The first thing most visitors notice is the cliffs. They dominate the landscape, rising directly from the ocean like giant walls of stone. Some stretch hundreds of meters into the sky. Others disappear into clouds drifting across the mountains. Standing at the edge of these cliffs feels almost unreal. Below, waves crash endlessly against dark rock. Above, seabirds ride powerful winds coming from the Atlantic. And all around, nature seems larger than life. These cliffs were formed millions of years ago through volcanic activity. Over time, wind, rain, and the ocean carved the islands into dramatic shapes visible today. The result is one of the most spectacular coastlines on Earth. But these cliffs are more than a natural wonder. For the Faroese people, they are part of daily life. Entire villages sit beneath them, roads curve around them, and homes have been built in their shadow for generations. To outsiders, they can look intimidating. To locals, they are simply part of home. Yet the cliffs also create a sense of isolation. Many communities are separated by mountains, fjords, and steep terrain. For centuries, reaching a neighboring village could take hours, sometimes days. And that isolation helped shape the culture of the Faroe Islands. A culture built on cooperation, resilience, and community. The Faroe Islands are among the most remote inhabited places in Europe. Look at a map, and the isolation becomes obvious. The nearest countries are hundreds of kilometers away. The North Atlantic surrounds everything. There are no large cities nearby, no major highways, no neighboring regions just beyond the horizon, only ocean. For centuries, this isolation shaped daily life. Travel was difficult, communication was slow, and communities learned to depend on themselves. The ocean connected the islands to the outside world, but it could also cut them off completely. Storms regularly disrupted travel, ships were delayed, and bad weather sometimes left villages isolated for days. Even today, the North Atlantic remains a powerful force. Weather systems move rapidly across the region. Fog can appear without warning. Winds can become severe. And the sea constantly reminds people that nature is in control. Yet despite the challenges, many Faroese people see isolation differently. To them, it is not a weakness. It is part of what makes the island special. Life moves at a different pace here. The landscape feels untouched. The communities remain close. And the connection between people and place remains unusually strong. Long before airports and undersea tunnels existed, survival depended on the sea. Fishing became the foundation of life in the Faroe Islands. Families relied on the ocean for food. Communities relied on it for trade. And generations learned to navigate some of the most challenging waters in Europe. Even today, Fishing remains one of the country's most important industries. Harbors come alive before sunrise. Boats leave while the islands are still asleep. Crews head into the Atlantic, knowing that conditions can change quickly. The work is demanding, the weather is unpredictable, and the ocean offers no guarantees. Yet it continues to support thousands of people across the islands. For many families, fishing is more than a profession. It is a tradition passed from parents to children, a connection to the generations who came before them, and a reminder that life in the Faroe Islands has always depended on understanding the sea. But in recent decades, something remarkable happened. The islands found a way to overcome their isolation without abandoning their identity. The answer lies beneath the ocean itself. For most of their history, the Faroe Islands were divided by geography. Mountains separated villages, fjords blocked direct routes, and the ocean stood between entire communities. Travel was often slow, and during bad weather, it could become impossible. But in recent decades, the Faroese began solving a problem that had existed for centuries. Instead of going around the mountains, they went through them. Instead of crossing dangerous waters, they went beneath them. Today, the Faroe Islands are connected by one of the most remarkable transportation networks in the world. Road tunnels cut through mountains, bridges connect islands, and some tunnels pass directly beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Driving through them feels almost surreal. One moment, you are on one island. Minutes later, you emerge on another, without ever seeing the sea. For a nation spread across 18 islands, these tunnels have transformed daily life. Students travel more easily. Businesses move goods faster. Families remain connected. And communities that once felt isolated are now linked year-round. Yet despite these engineering achievements, the Faroe Islands have not become a place dominated by cities and highways. Nature remains everywhere, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the landscape itself. If there is one image that defines the Faroe Islands, it is green mountains disappearing into fog. Clouds drift across the landscape almost constantly. Peaks appear and vanish throughout the day. Entire valleys can disappear beneath mist, then reappear only minutes later. The weather shapes everything. Rain falls frequently. Winds sweep across the islands. And conditions can change several times in a single afternoon. Yet this climate creates something extraordinary. The landscape remains green throughout much of the year. Grass covers mountains, valleys, and cliffs, creating the perfect environment for another symbol of the Faroe Islands, the sheep. There are more sheep than people living here. They graze on steep hillsides, wander across open grasslands, and appear almost everywhere. In fact, sheep have been part of Faroese life for centuries. They provided food, clothing, and survival during difficult winters. Even today, farming remains an important part of island life. Many families continue traditions passed down through generations. The connection between people and land remains strong, because life here is still closely tied to nature. The weather cannot be ignored. The landscape cannot be controlled. And every day begins with an awareness of the environment. For outsiders, that may sound difficult. For many Faroese people, it feels normal, because this landscape is not simply where they live. It is part of who they are. For many visitors, one question remains. Why stay? Why build a life on isolated islands in the middle of the North Atlantic? Why choose cliffs instead of convenience? The answer is not simple. Part of it is community. In the Faroe Islands, people know their neighbors. Families remain closely connected, and trust between communities remains strong. Part of it is safety. Crime rates are low. Children often grow up with remarkable freedom, and many residents value the slower pace of life. But perhaps the most important reason is belonging. The connection people feel to these islands runs deep. Generations have lived here, worked here, and built their lives here. The mountains are familiar. The ocean is familiar. Even the weather becomes part of home. Many young Faroese leave temporarily to study abroad. Yet a surprising number eventually return, because despite the opportunities elsewhere, something continues to draw them back. The landscape, the community, and the feeling that they belong to a place unlike any other. Standing on a Faroese cliff as the Atlantic stretches endlessly toward the horizon, it becomes easier to understand. The answer was never really about the cliffs, or the weather, or the isolation. It is about connection. Connection to family. Connection to community. Connection to a landscape that has shaped generations. Life here is not always easy. Storms still arrive. Fog still covers the mountains. And the ocean still reminds people how powerful nature can be. Yet thousands continue to stay. Not because the Faroe Islands are convenient, but because they offer something many places have lost. A strong sense of identity, a close connection to nature, and a feeling of belonging that cannot easily be replaced. The cliffs that seem isolated to outsiders do not feel isolated to the people who live here. They feel familiar. They feel meaningful. They feel like home. And perhaps that is the real reason people continue to live on these isolated cliffs. Because for the Faroese people, there is nowhere else quite like them. This is the Faroe Islands.